Good morning, everyone. So, guys, it finally happened. The United States have lifted the ban on the Ukrainians using long-range weapons to strike targets inside Russia. Guys, if you've been following my channel for a while and certainly our other platforms, you'll know I've been saying this for like the longest time. It's an inevitability that this is going to happen. Also, the other inevitabilities that are going to happen is when Donald Trump takes office on, I think it's the 20th of, 20th of January, he's going to stop funding to Ukraine. He's going to say, listen, Ukrainians, we can't keep giving you a blank check. It's over. That's going to mean that the Europeans are going to have to pull our big boy pants up and we're going to have to support the war in Ukraine. You know, the United States, they're going to be in a conflict with Iran. So that's what's coming in the medium-term future. Right now, short-term future, the news that the Ukrainians have been given the green light now to use these weapons to strike targets deep inside Russia. Now, this comes, I think, remember, guys, okay, this is not just something that's happened overnight. This was always going to happen. There's always, these guys behind the scenes, they'll be planning, they'll be making, they'll have triggers in place. Like I always tell you guys, make sure you have triggers in place. So, for example, right now, we're looking like we could have mass civil unrest starting Tuesday. Have triggers to hibernate, have triggers to relocate, and have triggers to evacuate if the situation gets bad. At government level, guys, guess what? They will be doing exactly the same. They'll have people sat down doing planning missions, doing different scenarios, doing different analyses. Analysis, is that a word? Well, it is now, because I'm a fully qualified Englishman and that is my birthright, to make words up. So this was always going to happen. This was an inevitability. Why? Because there's nothing to stop the Russians pushing in the east. There's literally nothing there anymore. I'll go straight to the map now, guys, and give you a quick update on what's been happening. I know I do this quite a lot, but I think it's key so you guys understand that the situation in Ukraine right now, it's just only going one way. So, like I always do, guys, this is from a month ago. This is the 17th of October. Remember, this town here, Pokrovsk, this is the key town. And just watch how far the Russians are pushing forwards. And also note that the Ukrainians are not pushing back. Unbelievable, guys. Absolutely unbelievable the amount of ground that the Russians are taking on a daily basis. So this, I feel, is the reason why these long-range missiles have been agreed. And remember, it's not just been done overnight. This will have gone to the United States, and the Ukrainians will have said to the United States, listen, guys, if you let us strike targets inside Russia, we will take out these key facilities for you. Now, what those key facilities are, who knows? But there will be strategic facilities. There will be facilities that it would be advantageous for the United States to have gone. This comes off the back of what Vladimir Putin said in, I want to say September. Was it September time? So Vladimir Putin in September said, if the Ukrainians are allowed to use long-range U.S., NATO, I can't remember whether he said U.S.-made or NATO-made, it doesn't really matter, long-range weapons to strike targets inside Russia, then he would consider that officially as they are at war with NATO. Well, guess what? Behind the scenes, with pomp and circus, good old Joe Biden or whoever's telling him what to read just declared war on Russia. Russia's declared war on NATO. Doesn't really matter now. As far as Putin's concerned, he is at war with NATO. Remember, this is all pomp and circus before, you get this tactical tiptoe whereby one world leader does something and you open the precedence and then everybody just jumps up to that level and then he'll step back then. Like Joe Biden, guess what? He's not going to be in office for much longer. 20th of January, he's going to be gone. He's not going to be the president of the United States anymore. So then Trump's going to step up and he's going to say, listen, this wasn't done on my watch, But it doesn't matter because the precedent will have already been there. The Ukrainians will already be using these long-range weapon systems to strike inside Russia. Now, guys, I've got a couple of articles up. I'm going to read them in real time. I've not read these articles yet. Let me just make sure there's no paywalls on them. No, that one's good. So I genuinely don't know what these articles say. I just picked two. Anyway, we'll go with that one first. So we'll go with this article and we'll see what other information we can get from it. Biden lifts ban on Ukraine using U.S. weapons to strike deeper into Russia. Officials have suggested permissions for wider use could be response to North Koreans joining the war on Putin's side. I don't think that's what the case is. I think this has been given the green light because of what I just showed you. Literally, the old-fashioned taking of ground. Doesn't matter how many North Koreans are there, if they're not being useful, which I don't think they are, guys. From what I've seen, from the the reports I've seen, the open source material, I don't think the North Koreans are being that effective. I think a lot of them, when given the chance, they'll defect, they'll surrender, and they'll be like, listen, I just want some liberal Western democracy. Maybe we'll have them in the United Kingdom in hotels or something. I don't know. But you see, this, officials have suggested it's not for that at all. Well, I don't think so at all. I think this is mainly because of the amount of ground that the Russians are taking. And the Russians did a huge attack, I think the night before, on the Ukrainian power grid. Remember, guys, okay, as we move into this new phase of warfare, this new phase of asymmetric warfare, non-conventional warfare, your power grid becomes a legitimate target. Now, the temperature in Ukraine gets really, really cold. The coldest I felt it out there was -26. Guys, I honestly can't tell you how I felt as someone coming straight from the British Embassy in Baghdad to Ukraine to -26. It was a culture shock, I'll give you that. Joe Biden has lifted the ban on Ukraine using long-range missiles to fire into Russian territory by permitting them to be used against Russian and North Korean forces in the Kursk region. Right, so does this mean they're only allowed to use them in the Kursk region? Doesn't really matter. It's the precedence that matters, that they're letting them use it. The U.S. president will allow Ukraine to use the U.S.-made ATACMS, so that stands for Army Tactical Missile System rockets, which have a range of 190 miles. So the ATACMS, Army Tactical Missile System, that it's a system like it says, and you can put lots of different range rockets in there. So when you hear ATACMS, you may hear conflicting reports. So it may be that the ATACMS has got a range of 80 kilometers or whatever. Doesn't really matter. It's the missiles that go in that, which have a range of 190 miles. A decision being justified by the presence of North Korean troops fighting alongside Russia against Ukraine. Though there was no public comment from the White House, the story first appeared in coordinated briefings to the New York Times and the Washington Post and the news agencies from Reuters and Associated Press. Volodymyr Zelensky appeared to confirm the news, though he said any proof of the change in policy would emerge on the battlefield and if the missiles were used. So, guys, these ATACMS, for me, are not the game changer. They are not the game changer. There's nothing that the ATACMS can achieve that the Ukrainian long-range drones can achieve. If anything, that range of 190 miles, it's kind of irrelevant when the Ukrainians are already doing their own drone strikes, up to 1,000 kilometers inside Russia. So it's kind of a non-news. The real game changer here is being able to launch the Storm Shadow and the Scalp missile systems from the F-16s. Now, the move forwards from this, and the devil's in the detail, did Joe, and again, I've not seen these articles, it'll come out in the press at future. Remember, we're just opening Pandora's box now. We've not got everything out of it. What this will lead to inevitably is the use of Storm Shadow, Scalp, and I think that there's a German one. There's a German one as well. I can't remember its name, but basically these are the air launch systems. Now the air launch systems are a lot more potent because they're air launched. Now these things can, you literally have an F-16 as your launch pad now for your missiles. So whereas your ATACMS system, the missile system, has to be ground based, it has to have, some sort of fire control order. There has to be some sort of target identifier. Of course, all this stuff can be done by satellite, but it's not the best when you're firing at long distances unless you've got a forward observation officer, FOO. Now, the Storm Shadow missile, it's a lot more potent because once you've programmed, and these things as well, the Storm Shadow missiles, they have to be programmed on the ground. So you can't program them mid-flight. The pilot has no decision where that goes. So they are totally unhackable. They're totally, you can't jam them. Once you fire them, they will hit the target and there's no calling them back. They're kind of like, wild dogs. Once you let them off the lead, they're not coming back. So this will inevitably, and again, guys, this is my speculation and my analysis, but this will lead to the use of those missile systems. So where do we go from that? What happens when that river's being bridged? Well, what's going to happen is you will have a situation, and I've said this long ago, as soon as the F-16s were announced, I said this long ago, I said, right, okay, so Putin has the decision to make. Does Putin take out all the airfields that the F-16s can fly from? Don't forget, the F-16s they're a tier 1 aircraft. They're not built to operate on substandard airfields. So they have to run on a really well-maintained airfield. What I feel will happen is Putin will just block bomb, carpet bomb, missile attack all these airfields in one night. What that will do is that will close down the F-16 capability of Ukraine overnight. It will be done, finished, over. It's not coming back. The F-16s that are already in Ukraine, you won't be able to get them out unless you truck them out. I don't even know if that's a thing. But that will then open up that Rubicon. So guess what now? We've got Vladimir Putin saying that he's at war with NATO. We've got Poland at the, on the border. The Polish are itching, to close the airspace down over Ukraine. What you will have then, you will have NATO aircraft, i.e. the F-16s, flying with NATO pilots, i.e. the Polish, over Ukraine to close down the airspace. They'll say, right, okay, we need to close down this airspace. So the Polish pilots are just going up to close down the airspace over Ukraine. They will intercept any incoming missiles and they will defend the airspace over Ukraine. What will happen also is, I feel, you'll have the Ukrainian pilots then, potentially NATO pilots going through an NGO, funded through an NGO, potentially NATO pilots that are part of the International Legion of Ukraine. Doesn't really matter. But, the flight program for the Ukrainian pilots in America was absolutely disastrous. They were sending the wrong pilots. They were sending underqualified pilots. There was huge communication links, wild stuff was happening. Stuff like, I'm told that so the Ukrainians asked the Americans what the minimum requirement was, and the Americans said, oh, we'll teach them everything when they get here. So the Ukrainians sent them over the first batch, as I'm told. I don't know where the rumor mill this is, but the first batch of trainee pilots that went to the United States couldn't even fly. And then they said, listen, the Americans phoned them back up and they said, listen, your pilots can't fly. And then the Ukrainians said, well, you said you teach them everything. And the Americans were like, well, yeah, but we expected you to send us fast jet pilots. I've had experiences like this myself, guys. These things happen. So I would suspect right now, and remember, this came out in the United States like a couple of months ago. There was a call for US pilots needed in Ukraine. Now, the specificity, I think that's a word, of the Ukrainian conflict is that as long as the pilots don't fly over Russian mainland, and they get shot down, it doesn't really matter because they're going to be landing in friendly forces. They're going to be recovered. Nobody's going to know who that pilot is. So that's kind of where we're going to, the next steps to be seen. So use of Storm Shadows. Once the Storm Shadows are used and they're being successful, then you're going to see the Russians totally carpet bomb the airfields that the Ukrainians are using the F-16s from. Then that's going to give the Polish the decision. Are they then going to enter this conflict, close the airspace? Remember, if the Polish Air Force close the airspace over Ukraine, that's code for Ukrainian F-16s are now flying sorties from Poland. That's the code, guys. That's the subtext. Now, what does that mean? What's happening next then? What's happening next? Well, we need to understand if these Storm Shadow missiles are going to be effective, because if they're not effective, if they're not having any real battlefield effect, it makes no sense for Putin to block that, to take out these runways. Let the Ukrainians play with their F-16s, let them do whatever they want. It doesn't really matter. Now, I think the key locations here that nobody's even talking about is the Kursk nuclear power plant. I've said from day one, week one, as soon as this incursion went into the Kursk region, I said, look, there's a huge nuclear power plant there. That's going to be a key location for the Ukrainians. And why not? Why wouldn't it be a key location for the Ukrainians? The Russians are heavily targeting the Ukrainians' power grid, their power generation systems. And it's still cheaper than the United Kingdom. And, so why wouldn't the Ukrainians target the Russian power grid? It's right there. They're in that region. I think this could be the first target for the ATACMS. Time will tell. Doesn't really matter. These things are going to happen at some point. So, people are saying, oh, but if the Ukrainians attack the nuclear power grid, it will be another Chernobyl. No, it won't. There's a lot of things in and around that location that can be taken down, i.e. substations, power lines, cables, utility buildings, lots of stuff that can be destroyed by the ATACMS, which are, by design accurate. These systems, these supporting infrastructure, this can all be taken out without actually touching the reactor. So the power station will go down, but the reactor and the dangerous stuff would all be kept relatively safe inside its inside its housing. So let's have another quick look, guys, what else the mainstream media are saying, and I will give some commentary. Where are we, guys? We've got another one here. That one. This is from the BBC, so a little bit biased, mostly propaganda. How long-range missiles? I didn't see the hyphen. How long-range missiles striking Russia could affect Ukraine war? U.S. U.S. official president has given a green light. Washington previously refused. The majority of policy reserves comes 2 months before Donald Trump, whose election raised fears over this. Okay, right. Doesn't really tell us anything there. Why has US allowed Ukraine to use long-range weapons? I bet it says something about, guys, I'm just scanning through this here, guys, because there's a lot of blah, blah, blah. Right, that's a load of blah, blah, blah there. What effect will the missiles have on the battlefield? Here we go. All right. Ukraine will... Right, guys, I'm just going to scan through this. Like I said, I've not read this. Yeah. So, there we go, guys. The supply of the missiles will probably not be enough to turn the tide of the war. Russian military equipment, such as jets, has already been moved to airfields further inside Russia in anticipation of such a decision. So there we go again, guys. It has to be these Storm Shadow missiles, the Scalp missiles. They're the ones that, could, and I'm not going to say they are because, like we've just seen from the map, the Russians are pushing ridiculously. But it's the Storm Shadow, it's the Scalp missile, it's the air-launched capacity that's going to have, if anything, an actual, it's going to be an actual gambit for the Ukrainians. I don't think it will be decisive. No, it won't. However, it will reduce a symbolic decision. Yeah. So this is a symbolic decision. And this, like we keep saying, it's going to lead to the Storm Shadows. Also, for the Russians, think about the think about the context now from the Russians. Vladimir Putin. Remember, it was Putin himself. It wasn't one of his lackeys. It wasn't one of his attack dogs. It was Putin himself. Who said, if the Ukrainians are let to use long-range weapons to strike targets inside Russia, you will consider that as they're at war with NATO. So it's only a matter of time now, guys, before that first missile goes in and Putin puts up his flag and says, right, that's it, guys, full-time war economy now. And remember, okay, the longer this war goes on, the better for Russia it is, because here in the West, we don't have that, we don't have the mindset to fight a long, drawn-out war. It can also raise the war cost for Russia. Yeah, that's could it lead to escalation of the war? Yes, absolutely. I don't need to read that. I'm probably more qualified than the person writing it. How will Donald Trump react? Well, he won't. He'll just stop funding when he gets in. Do you know what, guys? I should probably write these articles myself, right? Yeah, so you've got the ATACMS with their missile systems. You've got the HIMARS howitzer. Okay, right. Used by Russia. I should probably... Right, hang on. Right, so if you look at this here, guys, remember how I said the Russian forces have held 10 miles away from, was it 10 kilometers? I said the Russians have held 10 kilometers away from Pokrovsk. That's because it's in range of these smaller systems. So they've held at 10 kilometers, which is obviously, well within that range. Now, at 10 kilometers, you're actually in range of 120 millimeter mortar as well. So these things, your howitzers, these will be well in range of Pokrovsk. They can, bombard Pokrovsk, do whatever they want to Pokrovsk and as much as they want, because they've got the capacity to do that. Anyway, guys, that is it for this video. Just the jokes of the video, the plaster's being ripped off, the gloves are off now. Whatever analogies you guys want to make, it doesn't really matter. These things are happening now in real time. In a month, maybe a little while, you'll see the focus switch from Ukraine back to the Middle East. These two conflicts, guys, are going to drag the world into a global conflict. I remember, and everybody's thinking Donald Trump's gonna end the war within 24 hours. And again, I need to caveat this, guys. I would have voted for Trump. I think America now is in a fantastic place. They've got energy. They've got a lot of. I watched the UFC the other day when they were all chanting USA. It sent chills down my spine that they're so patriotic and they're getting stuff done. But the reality is they're not going to stop this war in Europe. This war's going to go on in Europe. The United Kingdom will lead NATO, or what's left of NATO, because NATO's over now. It's done. It's finished. It's not coming back. And the United States will have their good old-fashioned rook within the Middle East with Iran. That's kind of the way it's going. But, sorry, the jokes of this video. Long-range weapons now authorized in the Ukrainians to use them against the Russians. This is going to lead inevitably to the use of the Storm Shadow missiles, the Storm Shadow and the Scalp missiles. The potency of those systems is because they're air-launched. They can be launched from anywhere on the battlefield and potentially inside Russia itself. So that is it, guys. I'm going to grade it, and I'll get you guys another video later.